I'm glad you're here. Today's topic might surprise you. It's about how many of your everyday choices truly belong to you. Before we begin, I want to invite you into a small experiment. Think for a moment about the last important decision you made. Maybe it was about work, maybe a relationship, maybe money, maybe where you live, maybe how you spend your free time. And now ask yourself, was that decision really mine? Did I choose it because I wanted it? Or did I choose it because it was expected, because that's what my parents did, because people expected it of me, because I was afraid of what others would say if I chose differently? It's not an easy question, and there's no simple answer, but asking it is already a step toward awareness. Here's a question for you that you can write in the comments. If you could turn back time and make one major life decision, again completely free from your family's expectations and your environment, what would you choose differently? Maybe it's your career, maybe your partner, maybe where you live, maybe something entirely different. You don't have to share if you don't want to. But think about it, because your answer might tell you something important about yourself. This episode is a continuation of the previous one about how childhood influences adult life. Last time we talked about guilt and shame, about the inner critic, about how internalized voices from the past can judge us. Today we'll go further. We'll look at patterns, scripts, unwritten rules, expectations we absorbed so long ago that they now feel like part of who we are. Because that's what's most fascinating, and also the most unsettling. These patterns run so deep that we often don't notice them at all. We think they're our choices, our preferences, our personality. And yet very often it's a script written by someone else long ago before we even learned to read. Ready? Let's start with the basics. What does it actually mean that our choices come from childhood patterns? Imagine your life is a river. It flows in its channel. It has bends, rapids, calmer stretches. You're moving with the current. You make decisions. You choose directions. It feels like you're steering. But the truth is, the riverbed was carved a long time ago during childhood, by your parents, by culture, by the community you grew up in. You can float faster or slower. You can stop on the shore, but the shape of the river, its general direction, was set before you had anything to say. In the first years of life, a child's brain forms billions of neural connections. It's a period of incredible plasticity. The child learns everything: language, walking, recognizing faces, but also something less obvious: how the world works, what's possible, what's impossible, what's good, what's bad, who they should be. And those early lessons are unusually lasting because they're written into a brain that doesn't yet have tools for critical analysis. A child can't question what they hear. A child can't say, "Mom says this, but maybe she's wrong." A child takes everything as absolute truth. Dr. Bruce Perry, a child psychiatrist and expert in developmental trauma, describes this in his work on brain development. He explains that early childhood experiences literally shape the architecture of the brain. They create neural pathways that later determine how we see the world and how we react to it. What does that mean in practice? It means that if the rule in your home was that money causes conflict, you might, as an adult, unconsciously avoid earning more or sabotage your financial success. Not because you consciously decided so, but because deep in your brain it was encoded. Money equals trouble. If showing emotions in your home was seen as weakness, you might struggle with intimacy as an adult, with opening up, with being vulnerable. Your brain learned emotions are a threat. If your parents always put other people's needs before their own, you might feel guilty when you take care of yourself. You might automatically put everyone ahead of you until you're depleted. These are patterns, invisible programs running in the background, like a computer's operating system. You don't see it day to day, but it determines how everything works. And importantly, these patterns don't have to come from abuse. Your parents might have loved you. They might have wanted the best for you. They might have given you everything they had and still passed on patterns that no longer serve you. Because they had their own patterns too from their parents and their parents' parents. A chain reaching back generations. Psychotherapist Virginia Satir, one of the pioneers of family therapy, described how deeply we absorb family rules, roles, and values. They often stay outside our awareness, and yet they shape how we build relationships and make the most important decisions in adult life. Let me give you a few examples of common patterns. See if any of them feel familiar. Pattern 1. Success requires sacrifice. If in your home, success was treated as something that must come through hard work at the expense of everything else, you might unconsciously sabotage work-life balance as an adult. You might feel that if you have time for yourself, it means you're not working hard enough, that you don't deserve success. Pattern 2. Love must be earned. If your parents' attention and affection were conditional, if you received them only when you behaved, achieved good results, met expectations, you might unconsciously believe you have to keep earning love, that if you won't be good enough, people will leave. Pattern 3. You're not allowed to be better than your parents. This is one of the most subtle patterns. If your parents didn't fulfill their dreams or didn't achieve certain things, you might unconsciously block your own growth, because surpassing them could feel like betrayal, like showing off, like a painful reminder of what they didn't have. Pattern 4. Safety matters more than happiness. If your parents lived in constant fear, threat, uncertainty, financial instability, you might, as an adult, always choose a safer option, even if it doesn't satisfy you, even if you feel you're wasting your potential, because risk feels too frightening. Pattern 5. Conflict is dangerous. If conflict in your home ended with yelling, silence, aggression, or breakups, you might avoid disagreements at all costs. As an adult, you might struggle to set boundaries. You might agree to everything just to prevent conflict, even at the cost of your own needs. Pattern 6. Emotions are weakness. If expressing emotions was frowned upon, if you heard "don't cry," "don't overreact," "pull yourself together," you might struggle to recognize and express what you feel. You might suppress emotions until they explode at the wrong time. You might feel uncomfortable when someone shows you affection. Pattern 7. You must be perfect. If your parents accepted you only when you were the best straight A's, winning, achieving, you might develop paralyzing perfectionism. You might avoid new things because you're afraid you won't be great immediately. You might procrastinate because doing nothing feels safer than doing something imperfectly. These patterns aren't inherently good or bad. At some point, they might have been adaptive. They might have protected you as a child. The problem begins when we carry them into adulthood without reflection, when we let them run our choices, even though the circumstances have changed. Now that we know what unconscious patterns are, let's look at how they form, because understanding the mechanism can help dismantle it. There are 4 main sources of the patterns we carry from childhood. Source 1. Modeling. Children learn by observation. It's a basic evolutionary mechanism. Young animals watch older ones and imitate. Humans do the same, only more complex. As a child, you watched your parents. You saw how they reacted to stress, how they handled conflict, how they treated each other, how they treated you, how they talked about money, how they expressed emotions, how they dealt with failure. And it all got recorded not as conscious knowledge, but as a template, a default way of being. Albert Bandura, the psychologist known for social learning theory, demonstrates this in his famous experiments. Children who watched adults behave aggressively toward a doll became more aggressive themselves. Not because anyone told them to, but because they saw a model. It works both ways. Children who watched parents resolve conflict calmly are more likely to resolve conflict calmly. Children who saw parents care for themselves are more likely to care for themselves. The problem is, modeling is automatic. You don't choose what you absorb. You absorb everything good and bad, helpful and harmful. Source 2. Verbal messages. All the things you heard as a child said directly, repeated many times. Phrases, proverbs, rules, commands, prohibitions. Money can't buy happiness. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, but also, don't stand out. What will people say? In our family, we don't do that. They can sound harmless. But when you hear them dozens, hundreds of times, they sink deep. They become your inner voice, your way of thinking about the world. Sometimes the messages contradict each other. Be yourself, but don't stand out. Aim for success, but don't be materialistic. Say what you think, but don't offend anyone. And those contradictions also get recorded as inner conflict, as the constant feeling that whatever you do will be wrong. Source 3. Emotional experiences. Not only what you saw and heard, but above all what you felt. What emotions accompanied different situations. How your body reacted. A child's brain is extremely sensitive to emotional signals. Tone of voice, facial expression, tension in the parent's body. A child senses things an adult doesn't say. Fear, anger, disappointment, disapproval. And those emotional experiences form patterns. If every time you asked for something for yourself, you sensed tension in your parent, you learned, asking for things for myself triggers a negative reaction, better not ask. If every time you expressed anger you were rejected, you learned, anger is dangerous, better not show it. These emotional lessons are especially durable because they're stored not only in conscious memory, but in the body, in the nervous system, in automatic reactions. Source 4. Cultural and social context. We didn't grow up in a vacuum, neither did our parents. We were all part of a larger system, culture, community, the times we lived in. In many countries, our parents' and grandparents' generations grew up amid deep crises, wars, recessions, rapid political and social change. They experienced instability, economic uncertainty, loss of safety, that shaped their relationship with money, security, and trust in institutions, and they often passed those patterns on unconsciously. If you grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, you likely absorbed different patterns than someone raised in an anonymous big city. If you grew up in a deeply religious family, you absorb different patterns than someone raised in an atheist home. These contexts are invisible because they're everywhere like air. You don't notice them until you meet someone from a completely different background, until you see that life can be lived in a totally different way. I want to tell you a research story that illustrates the power of these patterns. Dr. Claudia Black, a pioneer of clinical research on families affected by alcoholism, described patterns in adult children of alcoholics. She observed that even people who never drank themselves often repeat family scripts. They enter relationships with addicted partners, take on caregiver roles at the expense of their own needs, and struggle to recognize and express their own emotions. What's interesting is that many of these people consciously decided to be different from their parents. They promised themselves they would never be like their mother or father. And in many external ways, they were different. They didn't drink, they didn't yell, they didn't neglect their children. But the deeper patterns still repeated. Ways of coping with stress, ways of being in relationships, beliefs about self-worth. Those things stayed unchanged despite conscious efforts to be different. Why? Because a conscious decision doesn't automatically change unconscious patterns, because you can know something isn't good for you and still do it. Knowledge and change are two different things. There's one more important mechanism worth mentioning: the compulsion to repeat. Freud described this phenomenon over 100 years ago. He noticed that people tend to recreate childhood situations in adulthood, even painful ones, maybe especially painful ones. Someone who was criticized as a child may choose partners who criticize them. Someone who was emotionally neglected may choose emotionally unavailable partners. This isn't masochism. It isn't a conscious choice of suffering. It's an attempt to work through an old wound, an attempt to fix what wasn't fixed in childhood, to finally get the love, acceptance, recognition that was missing back then. The problem is, this strategy rarely works. We recreate the situation, but we don't have new tools to resolve it, and we go in circles. But there is good news. These patterns can be changed. Not easily, not quickly, but they can be changed. And that's what we'll talk about in the next part. This is the longest and most important section because awareness alone, as valuable as it is, isn't enough. We need tools, concrete steps, things we can start doing today. Before we begin, I want to say something important. These steps won't look the same for everyone. Not all of them will fit you. Not all of them will resonate with your situation. And that's okay. Take what fits, leave the rest. Come back to it later, maybe something else will be relevant then. There isn't one path for everyone. There isn't a magic formula. There is a process, your own unique process. And don't expect big, fast changes. Patterns built over years don't disappear in a week. The brain needs time to create new pathways. The body needs time to learn new responses. You need time. Small steps, consistently. That's the key. Step 1. Identify your key patterns. You can't change what you can't see. That's why the first step is recognition, becoming aware of the patterns that drive your life. That requires honesty with yourself and courage, because sometimes these patterns are comfortable. They protect us from risk, rejection, pain. Admitting them means admitting we may have avoided something, that our life could have looked different. Here are questions that can help. Write them down, sit with them, return to them many times. Question 1. In what situations do I feel like I have no choice, even though I technically do? Where in my life does I have to repeat itself instead of I want to? Question 2. What decisions do I postpone because I feel like it wouldn't be appropriate? Who told me it wouldn't be appropriate? Where did I get that belief? Question 3. If my parents had never existed, if I had grown up in a completely different environment, what would I do differently? Who would I be? Question 4. What sentences do I repeat in my head most often? That's how it should be. That's how it's done. Normal people don't do that. Whose voice is that? Question 5. In which areas of life do I feel most restricted? Where do I feel blocked, even though I don't know by what? Let me give you an example. Mark had worked in a corporation for years. He earned good money. He had stability, but he felt empty. He dreamed of opening his own coffee shop. He had a vision, a plan, even savings. And yet he did nothing. Years passed. The dream stayed a dream. When he began working on his patterns, he discovered something interesting. His father lost his job when Mark was 10. He started a business. It failed. The family struggled financially for years. Mark often heard his mother say, "If your father hadn't gotten those ideas, we'd have lived normally." That message sank deep. A business equals risk. Risk equals loss of stability. Loss of stability equals disaster. Better not get ideas. When Mark saw that, he understood his hesitation didn't come from a lack of courage or resources. It came from a deeply rooted pattern, one that once made sense for a 10-year-old boy scared for his family, but no longer served an adult man with savings and a plan. Seeing the pattern didn't make him open a cafe overnight, but it gave him a new perspective. It helped him see he had a choice, that he could consciously decide whether he wanted to follow that pattern or not. Step 2. Separate the past from the present. This is crucial and often overlooked. Childhood patterns made sense in that context. They protected you. They helped you survive. They helped you gain love and acceptance from the people your survival depended on. But you're not a child anymore. The context has changed. What was adaptive then can be limiting now. The brain doesn't automatically distinguish that. For it, a pattern is a pattern. If it worked once, it will try to use it again always. Your task is to separate it consciously. When you notice a pattern activate, pause. Ask yourself, is this reaction appropriate to the current situation? Or am I reacting as if I were still a child in that home? Here's a concrete technique you can use in everyday situations. When you notice a strong emotional reaction that feels disproportionate, pause, take a breath, and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what just happened? Describe the facts without interpretation. For example, my manager asked me to revise a report. Second, what am I feeling? Name the emotion, for example. I feel fear. I feel like I'm about to be rejected. I feel like I'm hopeless. Third, does this reaction fit the situation? Did my manager ask for changes because they want to fire me? Or do they simply want something improved? What would a neutral observer say? They're simple questions, but they have huge power. They interrupt the automatic reaction. They create space between stimulus and response. They allow you to respond consciously rather than react automatically. Daniel Siegel, a psychiatrist and author of many books on the brain and relationships, describes emotional regulation as functioning within the window of tolerance. Under strong stress, we fall outside that window and start reacting automatically like we once did in similar situations. This simple 3-question technique, inspired by that approach, helps us return to the window of tolerance and regain access to more reflective thinking. Step 3. Write your own script. Up to now, you've been acting in a play written by someone else. Now it's time to write your own. This doesn't mean rejecting everything from the past. Some values and patterns you inherited may be good. They may serve you, They may align with who you want to be. But the point is to choose consciously to review your inherited patterns and decide, I keep this, I change this. I don't want this anymore. That requires answering fundamental questions. Who do I want to be? Not who should I be? Not who others expect me to be. Who do I want to be? What truly matters to me, not what should matter, not what matters to my parents or society, what matters to me. How do I want to live? What relationships do I want? How do I want to spend my time? What do I want to leave behind? These questions can be hard because you may discover you don't know, that you've lived by someone else's script for so long that you have no idea what you actually want. And that too is an answer that shows how much work is ahead, but also how many possibilities exist. In Man's Search for Meaning, Viktor Frankl, psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that even in the most horrific circumstances, a human being retains one freedom: the freedom to choose their attitude, the freedom to assign meaning to their experience. Frankl describes how, in a concentration camp, he observed people who still kept their dignity, who shared their last piece of bread, comforted others, refused to let circumstances define who they were. He wrote, "Everything can be taken from a person except one thing, the last of the human freedoms to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." If people in a concentration camp could choose their attitude, then you can choose how you want to live. You can write your own script. You can decide which patterns from the past you keep and which you leave behind. Practical exercise. Write a letter to yourself from the future. Imagine yourself 10 years from now living according to your own script, having consciously chosen your values and way of life. What would that future version of you say to you? What decisions did they make? What do they regret not doing earlier? What advice would they give you? That letter can be a compass, a directional hint. You don't have to know everything right away. It's enough to have a general direction. Step 4. Experiment with new behaviors. Thinking alone doesn't change patterns. You need experience. You need to show your brain and body that there's another way, that the world won't collapse if you act differently than you always have. This is hard because patterns exist precisely because they once protected us. Doing something different can trigger fear, discomfort, the feeling that something is wrong. So start small, low-stakes experiments, situation where, even if it goes badly, the consequences are minor. Example: if your pattern says you must always be nice and agree with everyone, start by saying no in a small matter. Maybe a co-worker asks you to swap shifts. Say, "No, this time it doesn't work for me," and see what happens. Most likely, nothing terrible. They'll say okay and move on, and you'll gain a new experience, a proof that you can say no, and the world doesn't end. Example: if your pattern says asking for help is weakness, ask for a small favor. Borrow a book. Ask for a ride. Notice what it's like, how people respond, how you respond. Example: if your pattern says you must always be productive, schedule 1 hour of doing nothing, literally. Put it in your calendar. Do nothing and see if you can tolerate it. Notice what emotions show up. Notice what the inner voice says. These small experiments matter enormously. They show you that you have a choice, that the automatic reaction isn't the only option, that you can choose differently and survive. Over time, as you collect enough of these experiences, your brain begins building new pathways, new default reactions, new patterns that you choose. Here are a few more examples, because I know it can be hard to imagine. If your pattern says you must always be prepared and spontaneity is irresponsible, do something without planning. Take a walk with no destination. Go somewhere without a map. Notice what it's like, how your body responds, what the inner voice says. If your pattern says you're not allowed to have a different opinion than others, say out loud that you see something differently, maybe with friends, maybe at work. Say, interesting, I see it a bit differently, and see what happens. If your pattern says you must always be strong, allow yourself a moment of weakness. Tell someone close to you, today is a hard day. I can't always handle everything. Notice how they respond and how you respond. If your pattern says money must be saved for a rainy day, spend a small amount on something that brings you joy for no reason, no occasion, just because. And watch what happens in your mind. The key is that these experiments are small and safe. This isn't about quitting your job or ending a relationship. It's about tiny trials that show you have a choice. Step 5. Involve the body. This is a step we often skip, and it's incredibly important. Childhood patterns don't live only in the mind. They live in the body, in muscle tension, in breathing, in posture, in nervous system responses. That's why mental work alone often isn't enough. You can understand your pattern intellectually and still feel it in your body. You can know there's no reason to be afraid and still have a racing heart and tight shoulders. The body has its own memory and it needs its own ways to process patterns. Bessel van der Kolk, a psychiatrist and one of the leading experts on trauma, wrote "The body keeps the score." He explains how past experiences, especially overwhelming ones, are stored not only in the mind, but also in the body. Van der Kolk shows that trauma, but also other powerful childhood experiences, aren't stored only as memories in the brain. They're recorded throughout the nervous system, in muscle tension, posture, automatic responses. That's why simply talking about them often isn't enough. Approaches that engage the body and help the nervous system return to regulation can also be needed. What can you do practically? First, start observing your body. Notice where you hold tension. Notice what happens to your breath when you're stressed. Notice how your body responds to different situations. Second, practice regulation techniques. This might be deep breathing, yoga, tai chi, or simply mindful movement. The goal is to have tools to calm your nervous system when patterns get triggered. Third, consider therapies that work not only through talking, but also with body and nervous system responses, such as somatic experiencing, sensory motor therapy, or EMDR. For many people, they're especially helpful in working with deep automatic patterns. Here's a simple technique to try. When you notice an old pattern activating, pause, place one hand on your chest, the other on your belly. Take 5 slow, deep breaths. Feel your belly rise and fall. Feel the ground beneath your feet. Relax your shoulders. It's simple, but it works because it interrupts the body's automatic response. It signals safety to the nervous system. It creates space for a conscious response. Another technique that can help is grounding. When you feel an old pattern taking over, focus on your senses. Name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can touch, 2 things you can smell, 1 thing you can taste. It may sound strange, but it has a strong scientific rationale. When we're stressed, the brain systems responsible for fight or flight take over. Grounding activates different systems, those involved in conscious perception, and helps bring us back to the present. Another technique is movement. Sometimes the best way to work through tension is simply to move. Go for a brisk walk, do a few squats, shake out your arms. The body wants to release stress, give it away. Remember, body-based work requires patience. The body learns more slowly than the mind, but what it learns tends to last longer. Let me share a few stories and studies that illustrate what we've been talking about. Adam's story. Adam is 45. He's worked at the same company for 20 years in the same role. He was offered promotion several times. He declined. Each time he had reasons. Too much responsibility. Too much stress. I'm not a leader type. When he began looking at his patterns, he discovered something surprising. In his family, there was an unwritten rule: don't get above yourself. His father was a factory worker. His grandfather was a factory worker. His great-grandfather was a factory worker. No one in the family ever held a higher position. When Adam got into university, he heard his uncle say, "Well, look at that Mr. Student, thinks he's better than us." It sounded like a joke, but with a sting, like a warning. And even though Adam graduated, even though he had potential, he unconsciously sabotaged his career. Because a promotion would mean crossing an invisible boundary, being better than his father and grandfather, betraying the family identity. When Adam saw it, he first felt anger at the family that limited him, then sadness for the years lost, and then something else: freedom, because now he could choose consciously whether to accept a promotion or not. But it would be his decision, not a pattern from the past. Beth's story. Beth is 38. She's never been in a serious relationship. She had a fling here and there, but nothing lasting. She told friends she was independent, that she didn't need anyone, that she preferred being alone. But inside she felt lonely, and she didn't understand why. She met interesting people. There were opportunities, but every time someone got close, she pulled away. She found reasons why they weren't right, or she simply stopped replying. In therapy, she discovered a pattern. Her parents had a toxic relationship, constant fights, mutual blame, emotional coldness. As a child, Beth watched it all and concluded relationships mean suffering. Better to be alone, safer. That pattern protected her from the pain she saw in her parents, from the risk of repeating their story. But it also deprived her of what she deeply wanted: closeness, intimacy, a partner. Working through it wasn't easy. It took time, small steps, experiments with opening up, staying in connection even when it felt uncomfortable, giving people a second chance. Beth still isn't in a relationship, but now she's single because she chooses it, not because she's afraid of closeness. And that difference is enormous. Attachment research shows how deeply early experiences shape adult relationships. John Bowlby and Mary Ainsworth, pioneers of attachment theory, showed that how caregivers respond to a child's needs in the early years shapes attachment patterns that can stay with us throughout life. Children with responsive caregivers tend to develop secure attachment. As adults, they build close relationships more easily, trust more easily, ask for help more easily, and offer it more easily. Children whose caregivers were inconsistent may develop anxious attachment. As adults, they may become overly dependent on partners, constantly seek reassurance, fear abandonment. Children whose caregivers were emotionally unavailable may develop avoidant attachment. As adults, they may avoid closeness, value independence above all, struggle to open up. But importantly, these patterns can change. Not easily, not quickly, but they can. Research suggests that secure relationships in adulthood can gradually reshape attachment patterns, and good therapy can help too. The brain remains plastic throughout life. Even the earliest childhood patterns can be modified. It takes effort, time, new experiences, but it's possible. And that may be the most important message from the research. You are not doomed to repeat the past. You have influence. You can change. I want to share one more story. Charles, a 50-year-old man, struggled his whole life to express emotions. He didn't cry. He didn't say what he felt. His wife said he was like a wall cold, unavailable. Charles didn't understand what she meant. He provided for the family. He was loyal. He didn't cheat. He didn't drink. What else was he supposed to do? When he finally went to therapy because his wife gave him an ultimatum, he discovered his pattern. In his home, boys didn't cry. His father never showed emotion. His mother didn't either. Feelings were something shameful, something to hide. Charles learned to cut off from emotions so effectively that he no longer felt them at all. He didn't know if he was sad, angry, or happy. Everything felt the same, gray, flat. Working on this pattern took a long time. He had to learn to recognize emotions from scratch, name them, express them. It was like learning a new language at 50. Hard, frustrating, sometimes embarrassing. But he did it. After 2 years of therapy, he told his wife he loved her for the first time in his life. She cried, he did too. And those were tears of joy. That story shows something important. Change is possible at any age. The brain is plastic throughout life. Yes, the earlier we start, the easier it can be. But it's never too late. And there's one more study I want to mention. Psychologist Carol Dweck spent many years researching what she called mindset, deep beliefs about our abilities, potential, and capacity for change. She found that what we believe about ourselves strongly shapes how we learn, how we react to difficulty, and how we build our lives. Dweck distinguished two main kinds of mindset: fixed mindset and growth mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe their traits are unchangeable, that intelligence, talent, ability, personality are set for life. In this kind of thinking, failure isn't information, it's proof of limitation. That's why challenges can feel threatening, and effort can feel like failure. If you have to try, it means you're not good enough. People with a growth mindset believe they can learn and change throughout life, that abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through practice, engagement, and experience. Failure isn't a label. It's feedback, something you can learn from, something that doesn't define your worth. What's fascinating is that mindset shapes reality. Dweck's research shows that people with a growth mindset often develop more and achieve more, not because they're better, but because they act differently. They take on challenges more often, they quit less after setbacks, they try longer, they bounce back more easily. And it begins with one belief: I can learn, I can change. It's worth trying. The same applies to working with childhood patterns. If you believe you can change, you increase the chances that you actually will. Mindset matters. We've reached the end. Thank you for staying with me. Let's summarize what we covered. Many of our everyday choices aren't as free as we think. They come from patterns formed in childhood patterns we inherited from parents, from culture, from experience patterns that were written into our brain and body before we had the chance to evaluate them consciously. These patterns formed through modeling, watching adults, verbal messages, what we heard, emotional experiences, what we felt, and cultural context, the environment we grew up in. But these patterns can be changed. We discussed 5 steps that can help. Step 1. Identify your key patterns. Ask hard questions. Notice where I have to repeat itself instead of I want to. Step 2. Separate the past from the present. Learn to recognize when you're responding to the current situation and when you're responding to an echo of the past. Step 3. Write your own script. Decide consciously who you want to be and how you want to live without living by someone else's expectations. Step 4. Experiment with new behaviors. Start small. Collect new experiences that show you there's another way. Step 5. Involve the body. Remember that patterns live not only in the mind. Work with breath, tension, and the nervous system. Remember, not every step fits everyone. Take what resonates. Leave the rest. Come back later. And don't expect quick change. This is a marathon, not a sprint. Patterns built over years don't disappear in a week, but every small step matters. Every moment of awareness. Every experiment with a new behavior. Childhood shaped you, but it doesn't have to define you. You have influence over how you live, what decisions you make, who you become. Back to the question from the beginning. If you could turn back time and make one major life decision, again completely free from your family's expectation and your environment, what would you choose differently? Maybe your answer feels clearer now, or maybe you need more time. Both are okay. Share in the comments if you want. Your story might help someone else see something in themselves. Sometimes one word, one story, one comment can change someone's day. Thank you for your time, for your openness, for wanting to grow and understand yourself better. If this episode was helpful, if you took something from it, I'd be grateful for like it helps reach others who may be looking for content like this. And if you want more conversations like this about psychology, self-understanding, and building a life that truly fits, you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episodes. I'm rooting for you. Truly, take care, stay warm,